Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published? Does the goal of being an author seem too lofty? Or thoughts of having multiple books and making a full-time living are as fantastical as living in Cinderella's castle? Welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where aspiring authors can be heard. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have gotten their foot on the author career path. Hear what they've done to get there and where they want to go now. Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
All right, so this is a really cool episode of Discovered Wordsmiths. Today, I have Jeff Strand back. Jeff was on back episode 50, talking to us about writing and going to become a full-time author after writing for 20 years. I love talking to Jeff. I love his books. I've talked to him a couple times. I got to meet him this year. I think I mentioned that a couple weeks ago. This time, though, he got to do the novelization for Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Well, what better job than that could there be, right? I mean, this is a 40-year-old cult classic horror comedy that is very tongue-in-cheek, and he got to write a novelization for it. Now, if you've seen the movie, the first thought is, really? How the heck do you write a novelization for that movie? Exactly. And I think he did a wonderful job. It's a very funny book. In fact, I told him I thought it was his funniest so far. I enjoyed it immensely. So we have a good talk about the book, about the movie, writing the book, etc. So it's a different and interesting episode. What makes it even more special is my buddy Rhys is on here. And that's because this was a big crossover event with Horror Lasagna podcast, where we interviewed Jeff about the movie and the novelization. And now I'm putting it here on Discovered Wordsmiths to talk about the book. But it's the same interview. I'm using it in both places. So it's a bit of a cheat, you might say. But if you don't watch or listen to the Horror Lasagna podcast, you get this one here. So other than that, this past weekend, I went up to Cleveland, author friend Jay Thorne, who some of you may know, some of you may have heard me mention before. We had a writer's retreat with a couple other good writers, and it was focused on writing for the weekend. That was the focus. And it really changed my writing this weekend. I got a lot more words than I normally do. I got more words on Saturday and Sunday than I normally get in a whole week of trying to fit it in between work and everything else. So that was great. I got to start on a series that has been in the back of my mind, pounding away, wanting to come out, but I've wanted to get more of Town Magician done before I started on it. And this weekend I said, I'm going to focus on it. So I got 5,000 words into the first book already. So I'm very happy with that. It was a great weekend. We went to a couple good places, the Museum of Art, and did some writing there. And he has what they call co-hatch, and it's rent space, office space, and you can go and work there, a shared space. And it was great on a Sunday to sit there and work. We could all spread out, so we weren't bugging each other, but we were close, so we ate together. We talked if we had problems. We also went into ChatGPT quite a bit. Jay has been working on something with that, and he's showed us what he's been working on. So it was really cool to see what he's doing with ChatGPT. And it really gave me some thoughts and ideas like, oh man, I'm such a database computer person, and I've learned to use Google and Bing and all of those to a certain level with a certain way of using them, that I'm still using ChatGPT in that method, in that way. But the way Jay was doing it is totally different. There's totally much more of a conversation that he was doing. And I need to break my barriers in my mind to be able to use the tool in that way as effectively as Jay was showing us. So it was a great weekend. I'm sure I'll talk more about that, or things will come up about it. But for this episode, I want you to sit back and listen to the Jeff Strand talk about his novelization. And if you've never seen Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, go out and check it out. No, it's not the biggest budget. No, it's not for everybody. It's a tongue-in-cheek cult classic. Treat it like that. It's funny in that way. So Here we go. So, this is a special episode. It's not even one of our bonus episodes, Rhys. This is just a special episode. It'll take the place, the highest place of honor amongst all our episodes. So,
It's a
uh,
crossover event.
it is. We're going to do this with Discovered Wordsmith also. So, Jeff, you get to be on my other podcast twice. You're one of the lucky handful. So, before we get rolling, everybody knows me and Rhys, all four people in Remotion that listen to us. Hello. So, first of all, we've got a guest, Jeff Strand. So, Jeff, uh, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, and then we can start making fun of you.
I'm a writer. I have written a little over 50 books. My most recent one was Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, the novelization, which I assume will come up at some point during this discussion.
Oh, we
So I
probably should
initially
have
do
thought to
horror
talk
comedy.
about that.
I've done some young adult comedy, pretty much all over the place, but mostly horror comedies where I'm at.
And I know I've mentioned you to Rhys and others a couple times that I just fell in love with your books. And I texted you the other day. I said, "Oh my God, I'm reading Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and it's your best one." I am out loud laughing, and I'm reading it to my son, just bits and pieces, and he's laughing just listening to the little bits I put. So, we want to talk a little bit about the movie and the novelization a bit. So, my first question, Rhys. Oh, you had a couple questions um, background.
I did actually, Jeff. This is the first time I've met you, and aside from a friend of ours who we know who left a long time ago to go live in Alaska,
Still does.
Alaska is one of the three places that I've told my children I should never go because I'll probably never come home from. So I'm going to ask you to disabuse me of my romantic notions of what Alaska's like. So what was it like growing up in the Great White North?
Well, I didn't know any different. So I was born in Baltimore, but I grew up in Alaska from 6 months old till 15. So I didn't know any different. So the fact that it is light 24/7 during the summer was not weird to me. That's just the way it is. The fact that it gets I would get on the bus to go to school and be pitch black, and then by the time I got on the bus to come home from school, pitch black. There are a little bit of daylight in the middle, but you know, so the long nights during the winter, the long days during the summer, that was just the way things were. So people would visit in the summer and like, how can you sleep? It's 4 in the morning and it is bright out. And but that none of that stuff was weird to me. What I realized was the most weird and didn't impact me at all growing up was in Fairbanks. You were in Fairbanks. So like right now I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I you know think nothing of, I'll drive to Nashville. Tomorrow I'm going to go to Atlanta, Knoxville, the whole continental United States is at my disposal without it being that big of a trip. Whereas in Fairbanks was the only place I was unless we took a vacation to Anchorage, which was like 6 or 8 hours. So there were tiny little towns that were basically a gas station and maybe a restaurant. But for the most part, if you were a resident of Fairbanks, that's where you spent all your time because there weren't other cities that you could just drive to on a casual basis. So,
Nowhere else to go.
yeah,
I talked to a lot of Canadian authors, and it's kind of the same thing. They're like, "Well, yeah, I got a favorite bookstore. It's like 3.5 hours north of me." I'm like, "Do you have anything closer?" No, that's like the closest. And I thought it was bad here driving 8 miles to get to the grocery store.
yeah. Well,
So
Fairbanks had everything. It had a movie theater, it had bookstores, it had restaurants, and stuff, but there was nothing beyond the boundaries of it. So,
Yeah.
So did I know we go a little south here into Amish country, and there's lots of places that have horse and buggy set up. So did they actually have like dog sled setups that people drive to the movie theaters to see the movies?
no, you had
Darn.
dog sleds that were people training for the Iditarod race, but you didn't have people who were dog sledding as a means of transportation.
Oh, there you go. See, my fantasies are
They're,
gone. I'm
they're
so
dashed on the
disappointed.
rocks.
Yeah.
Well, this was Fairbanks, which is the second biggest city. If you're in Anchorage, it's basically like any other big city. Fairbanks
Yeah.
was quite a bit smaller, but yeah, you didn't have the, mush, mush, let's go to the movies type thing.
Well, the Riker from Star Trek was from Fairbanks, so good
Really?
company.
Yeah.
And he did live in Kent for a while, which is one of the reasons I went when after I read his the one book Cyclops Road, I went, oh my god, this guy like was in Kent about the same time I was living in this area, and we're like 2 days apart. So Reese, you call me old man because we're like 5 months apart. Jeff is actually 2 days older than me, so I'm not the oldest anymore.
Look at that. New senior man in the room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look at that. So, all right. So first of all, the movie itself. Now, I know a lot of people probably haven't seen the movie, which is good. That's what we want. We want movies like that. It is not your typical horror movie, especially for what Reese and I do. It's comedy. Jeff, how would you describe the movie and what you enjoy it with it?
It's as silly as you would think from Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. It's weird seeing stuff saying it's one of the worst movies ever made where they don't acknowledge that it's a comedy. It's not a straightforward movie about killer tomatoes. It wasn't some guy saying we're going to make the scariest movie ever about killer tomatoes. It's a goofy comedy from beginning to end. It's just joke, 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 joke. Not every joke lands, but a lot of them really do. Even 45 years later, there's
Mhm.
lots of genuinely funny stuff in the movie, and it some of the jokes are overplayed. Some of the it's not a flawless masterpiece of cinematic comedy, but it really works. I love the movie. I think it's really entertaining and fun.
Absolutely agree. If you like airplane movies, there's probably a lot in this you'll like. But the funny thing is, I like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but I'm not as big on Airplane. I never
I
have
love
found.
Airplane too. So
See,
Airplane, Naked Gun, all those movies, they're all in my wheelhouse.
yeah, I'm weird. I know. My son tells me I'm a weirdo for not liking them, and I'm like, I don't know. When I saw them, I guess I didn't find them funny, so it just kind of stuck. But
I have
like
to
you
agree
said
with
with
your son here. So
like you said with Killer Tomatoes, it it's got some things in it that are very subtle, and you have to really pay attention sometimes to pick up on them. There's a few jokes that are a little outdated, let's say nowadays, that probably would get people upset. But the stupid little things like they go into that conference room and it's like so narrow they have to crawl across the table, but they don't make a big show of it other than if you think about it. Or when the Japanese guy hits the picture and it's the Arizona and it falls in a fish tank. And
right,
the funniest part for that for me is there's no fish tank in the room. So where did that fall into the fish tank?
yeah.
It's little things like that that I think are great.
Yeah, the conference room is great because it doesn't overplay. It's not like wacky music, like wah, 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 no, no,
Right.
no, no,
Right.
no. It's just people trying to retain their dignity while they get seated in a room that's way too small for them.
Right. Would you like, Reese?
Well, I mentioned to Steve just before we started, I liken it almost to Mad Magazine, um, because it moves so quickly between one joke
Yeah.
to the next, and the scenes. So you're probably 30 to 40 minutes into the film before you actually have any recognizable recurring characters, because everything is just happening so fast. And then they do the same kind of like Mad Magazine used to do with they'd have little jokes that would be running across the bottom like a ticker tape kind of thing, and you're like,
Right.
where'd that come from? So that's one of the things. Airplane and those kind of movies are almost a genre unto themselves, but this feels like something that's a little set outside because and I've mentioned it before with movies, they have a literary feel, and this does feel like I'm opening a new issue of Cracked Magazine whenever I'm watching this.
Yeah.
Well, Mad Magazine was superior though.
It
So
was, but just throw some love to the other stuff.
yeah, yeah, you know. Uh, so watching the movie, Jeff, and I've read the book, watched the movie now. I told Reese I owe him a copy of the book because it's just pretty fantastic. He'll love it. How did you come about and get this? I mean, okay, first of all, if anybody hasn't read the book, we're trying not to get Jeff arrested, so we won't mention him killing Mr. Tomato book writer. But that right there made me laugh. That was the prelude, and you just flowed right in with the feel of the whole movie, and then each scene you expanded on. So let's back up. How did you get the gig? Why did you want to do it? And what took so long? This is like 40-year-old movie.
Well, part of it was just it would be a really fun book to adapt. Because the movie is just all jokes. I'd love to do an adaptation of Airplane too. They'll never let me do it, but that would be so. What really happened was I was thinking of, what to tweet, what will amuse my Twitter followers. And so I just said, how is it possible that no one has invited me to do a Attack of the Killer Tomatoes novelization? It was not meant to be a legitimate solicitation of work. It was just something funny to tweet. And then Mark Miller at Encyclopocalypse Books sent me a private email and said, "Hey, if you're serious about that, I'll see what I can make happen." Like, yeah. And then within a few weeks, I was on a Zoom call with the filmmakers who were all in. My resume is pretty good for someone to write an Attack of the Killer Tomato. It's not like, oh man, let's take a shot on this guy who has no experience in that particular genre. It's like when it was announced, people were like, yeah, Jeff Strand, Attack of the Killer
Yeah,
Tomatoes.
that makes sense.
If it was Jeff Strand doing Casablanca, he'd be, wait, what? But Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is something that I can pull off. So basically, the only request they had was keep it as family friendly as the movies. The movie it's PG, but it's 1978 PG, so it'd be a
Right.
fairly strong PG-13 now. So I kept to that, which is what I would have done anyway. And I basically pitched it as I'm going to treat it like you guys had Marvel Cinematic Universe money to make the original movie. And so they were all in, and I was set free to write Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Did they have any handcuffs as far as like lore goes or anything like that you had to follow, or were you, because the movie's very short on where they came from or anything like that. There's not a lot of backstory to it. It just jumps right in, and they developed it more in the later films. But again, some of those weren't the exact same people, so I wondered if they were like, "Hey, you need to stick to this, and you can move from there and go forward, but start here."
No, there was nothing, and I treat it as a
Wow.
self-contained because my original thought was I'm going to weave in elements of all the movies and the cartoon series and all that. And I thought no, because if this is successful, if someone else wants to do Return of the Killer Tomatoes, I don't want to step on their toes. So there are no George Clooney jokes. There are no, Professor Gangrene isn't in it. I decided I would stick exclusively to the first movie and not mess with what other people might want to do if there is a future of more Attack of the Killer Tomatoes novels. But yeah,
Well,
there was no, you need these characters need to be in it. You need to stick to this. It wasn't, I did a short story that never got published for a major video game franchise, and they were very, very strict.
Yeah.
These characters need to be handled this way. What happened ultimately was that the story went to their lore person who said, that's not really the direction we want to take with this character. And I got paid in full, but they didn't use the
Yeah,
story.
they nixed
I
it.
think Tomatoes not like that. It was have fun. We trust you. They read it. It wasn't like they have read the book. They love it,
Oh,
but
well, that's good.
no, you know, no handcuffs. No stick to this. Just have fun.
which is good because, like I said, I read it and I was laughing. And I love your books, and this one just made me laugh even more than normal. So just you had a structure, but you were able to do what you wanted with it. I think it worked really well. But the weird thing to me was why choose a movie novelization now? Because they're not that popular. They used to be way more popular, but nobody sees too much, especially for a low budget movie from 40 years ago. It's a super interesting choice because it fits us well. And the fact that we're talking about this low budget movie that had sequels, Rhys, I mean, that, that's
Oh, yeah.
that. So why, I mean, I know it was like, hey, let's make this happen. Why do you think they wanted to do it and a movie
Well,
novelization?
Encyclopocalypse has done some vintage novelizations. So they brought back some that were written at the time, but they've also gone back and done, Creature and stuff like that. And they've announced a few more. They're doing Nail Gun Massacre and Dead Girl and Redneck Zombies. So they're there's a little bit of a niche market. We don't know how big it is. It's too early to gauge the success level of stuff like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. But really, it was just kind of a fun thing. I think you need to pick movies that people can see the novelization potential in. It's like Technical Tomatoes. It's it's going to be a really really dumb book. It's just goofy fun. It's not meant to be a literal page. It doesn't follow the previous trend in novelizations, which were you have seen the movie in the theater, you're never going to see it again unless it goes into a second run, but you've got the novelization, so you can relive the story of E.T. the extraterrestrial
Right.
whenever you want in book form. Whereas now it's just you have to bring something more to it. So it's not meant to just be a transcript of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. It's basically all new jokes, unless I took their joke and use it to springboard to something else. Because the jokes in the movie are perfectly good. My job was not to retell stuff that already works in the movie. My job was to take the framework of the movie and expand on it and do all new jokes.
And even there, though, the two I thought of reading it, the one with the bad Japanese overdub with the guy's lips moving, and then you hear a voice say, "And then I said," and that cracked me up because obviously the Godzilla movies and everything else. But then the musical number, I don't know if I've ever read such a great retelling of a musical number in a novel format, and you did that great, expanded that scene wonderful. So I think you broke new ground. You pioneered a new modern novelization of a movie because the stuff makes you laugh in the movie if you have twisted minds like some of us. But again, the book just expanded on all of that, making it even funnier. I think.
Yeah. What I wanted it to be the best way to read the book, you could read it without any prior Tomatoes experience. The best way to do it is to have freshly seen the movie because a lot of it is callbacks to the film. So the optimal way to experience it, you watch the movie and then you go right into the book, and then I think there's a lot of stuff that works even better in that context. But yeah, the point again, it's not to you can watch Attack of the Killer Tomatoes whenever you want. It's on streaming. You can get the multiple DVDs. There's the big collector's edition. It's very easily accessible. So what I wanted to do was give the book its own identity. It works as a separate, but it's completely linked to it. It's not, I love Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. This wasn't me being better than the movie. This was having fun with various aspects of it and trying to get very similar tone with a completely different experience.
With the frenetic pacing of the film, was that at all of a challenge when you were writing it? I would think it would be hard to get into like a groove and, pound a bunch of pages out because the movie shifts gears so quickly from scene to scene to scene.
Not really, because I've got experience in it. There's a reason I was the right guy to write this book. So I've done my adult horror comedy novels. I try to treat the horror legitimately, but have lots of laughs. But I've done young adult books that are just joke, 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 joke. So I've done, book. It's not if you read Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and then you read my book A Bad Day for Voodoo. There's, you can see there's still the meta element, and so I have done books that are just pure comedies all the way through. So it wasn't like, okay, how am I going to tackle this? I have that level of experience. It's hard. It's not like, oh yeah, I could just easily knock this out. It was a fun book to write. It is, when you are doing something that is just joke after joke after joke, and you're not letting the characters or the story carry you through. Because I'll be honest, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, the novelization, you're not going to get deeply invested in these characters. Like, I don't care if it's funny or not. I need to know what's going to happen to this guy. That's not the experience you're going to get with it. And it's not a scary book. It's just as funny as I could possibly make it. So yeah, you do need to keep the pacing up. It
Yeah.
creates a scenario like like the movie Airplane, like the movie Naked Gun, like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. You can't let up on the laughs because the book doesn't have the framework to allow you to say, yeah, let's just cool down for a couple pages. No, it has to be nonstop throughout, which is not for everyone, but the people who love it love it.
Which actually you do a lot of fourth wall breaking in the book, and you even reference that. It's like, okay, Mr. Author, well, now maybe we should slow this chapter down and not put so many jokes. So the joke was the not doing
Yeah,
so many jokes, which I thought was pretty brilliant.
yes.
And and Rhys, so we talk a lot about the special effects in movies, and the special effects in this one obviously is not computer graphics. They They do it wonderfully though, because they don't try and make all these big scary looking tomatoes. They just take like garden tomatoes and put them on the ground, then overdub it with
Yeah.
Yeah.
what 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 are thoughts on the special effects? I know a lot of people would say, well, this movie sucks, like you said, because the special effects suck. But I think the special effects are part of the comedy.
Well, the movie starts off with one of arguably the greatest special effects in all of cinematography when they accidentally crashed the helicopter that they hired for the scene. And then they're
Yes,
like, "Oh, hey, let's just use that in the movie." You don't
which is
get
so
much more
weird.
authentic than that.
Right.
After that, the special effects they use kind of ramp up because it starts with just tomatoes, and then it progresses from just tomatoes. There's some stop animation at tomatoes,
Yeah, in
and
the
then
grocery store.
towards the end of the film, they figured out how to make giant tomatoes out of foam and put them on wheeled carts. So, it slowly built up over time. But again, it's not. You've referenced before, Steve, in movies where they try to show too much of the bad guy and it kind
Yes,
of ruins it. And in this case, even though they're being silly, they're still being very prudent with the usage of the giant tomatoes and things like that. So I think it works really well, especially for the film, the way it's set up.
yes, agreed. Jeff, I mean, I know some of Reese's favorite movies, like all 1,200 of them. What are some of your other favorite horror movies?
Um, Shaun of the Dead is my favorite horror movie and favorite movie. So it's like it works brilliantly as a comedy and brilliantly as a horror movie. So it's not like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. That in Shaun of the Dead, it's really funny, but you're also fully invested in the characters. When things get serious, there are actual stakes. So that's my number. I'll swing over to my poster, and then
Nice.
Return of the Living Dead, one of my all-time favorites. That one, I I think to me that's the '80s horror movie that holds up the best. I think it still plays just as well now, even though a lot of the stuff that they originated is now zombie lore.
Hmm.
It's
Right,
got the fast zombies that Return of the Living Dead. That wasn't 28 Days Later. That was Return of the Living Dead. The fact that they a hit to the brain won't kill them, that you have to dismember them. The fact that the meta aspect, the fact that this is based, Night of the Living Dead was just a movie, so the character is referring to Night of the Living Dead. So it's got all kind, talking zombies. It's got all kinds of stuff that was done later, but it does it all in one movie. So that's one of my all-time favorites. I love the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's probably my favorite, just straight horror movie. Although that has lots of dark comedy too. It's got the funniest line of any movie of "Look what your brother did to the door." That
right,
one line is the most perfect comic relief line ever because it's completely logical in a movie where suddenly logic shouldn't apply.
right.
So it's like you've got this guy wearing, human skin, chainsawing a door, and of course you're going to be upset that this guy chainsawed your door. But in the context of the movie, you don't think they care about their door. So then to have, look what your brother did to the door, just suddenly takes you back to the reality of the situation is absolutely brilliant. So original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then there's, as for more obscure stuff that maybe not a lot of people have seen, May, one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Lucky McKee with Angela Bettis. That I saw that at a film festival, and it rocketed to the all-time favorites. And there's a lower, much, much, much lower budget movie called Found, which is just one of the darkest and most
I don't know that one.
disturbing things. That's something good. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll have to look
Reese.
it up.
Yeah, Reese always makes notes of any he hasn't seen, and then we'll watch movies and reference. Here's 20 other similar ones. Jeff, have you seen Todd in the Book of Pure Evil?
I have not. I've heard it's really good.
Oh,
Yeah,
you would enjoy it.
we enjoyed watching. We reviewed it, enjoyed it. And another one that comes to mind, Phantom of the Paradise.
Yes, I hadn't. I Phantom of the Paradise is something I'd been wanting to see for a really long time, and back when I first saw the documentary Terror in the Isles, they had a clip from it. And it's where he hits I think Garrett Graham in the mouth with the toilet plunger. And I'm like, I have to see this movie, but I didn't know what movie it was. And the documentary didn't identify the clips. So I would watch the end credits. They had the long, long list of all the clips. Like, I don't know which one it is. I don't know which one it is because I haven't seen all these movies. So I finally discovered that it was Phantom of Paradise, but I could never find it on video. I finally saw it about 3 years ago in the actual movie theater.
Wow.
A theater in Atlanta played it, so I went. So my first experience with Phantom of the Paradise was seeing it on the big screen with a big crowd, and it was wonderful. It lived up
As
to
it
all my.
was meant to be.
Right. Not in our basement in the dark, right, Rhys?
Yeah,
Like most of the bad horror movies we've watched through the years.
yeah.
So, what else you got, Reese? I know you had a whole list, and I've jumped in.
Oh no, we've covered a lot of it. I
Yeah.
You had gone to Bowling Green for school,
Right.
and while you were in Bowling Green, did you ever go see Mary Bach's Fingers?
I did not. I'm not sure what that is.
There's a small uh, museum, for lack of a better word, and they had a display of the last public execution in Bowling Green, and it was a farmer who, in a mad rage, butchered his wife basically. And when the sheriff showed up, he put three of her fingers in a jar full of whiskey to use as evidence in the case. And those fingers have lasted this entire time. They're still in a jar on display in this museum, along with the hangman's rope and the knife he used and tickets for the hanging. But it
Yeah.
seemed macabre and bizarre enough. I kind of wondered if it was something that you had seen while you were there.
No, I spent too much time in movie theaters and bookstores. I missed out on the fingers.
Well,
And I
now I
did,
want to see them.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm building it up, but it really is. You walk in, you're like, "Yep, they're there," and
Yeah.
then then you're gone. But
Three of them.
But really, how many people can you go up to and say, "Have you seen Mary Box Fingers?" Oh yeah, I've been there. You get, well, no, what's that? Let me tell you. I mean, come on, it's all in the presentation
it's
of
true.
doing something that they haven't done. I love doing that.
Yeah. I also had noticed that your first publication was in a literary magazine, and my brother and my dad back in the 70s were big into getting, Isaac Asimov and Astonishing Tales delivered to the house, so they had subscriptions. And I wonder if you think that society is kind of at a loss now that literary magazines seem to kind of be a thing of the past.
Yeah, it's not as much fun. Cemetery Dance, it's published very infrequently now. It's still a print magazine. I got the latest issue a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I used to get tons of them. I would go to the bookstore and there'd just be a whole rack of horror fiction magazines, and I would, you know, read a lot of new stuff that way. Now I really don't. Now I either read anthologies or just novels. So yeah, it was more fun to, you know, I wasn't getting published regularly back in those days, so I would get lots of rejections. I don't have a big stack of literary magazines I've been in. I have a big stack of rejections from magazines.
Yeah.
It's more fun to, see your story in an actual printed magazine. But
It's
yeah,
like
so
the fake money drop off. You take all your rejections, put them in between the two magazines you've been in, and so it looks like you have a huge pile of these literary magazines. Oh, there goes Reese again. He'll be back, I'm sure. We'll just keep going and we'll pretend
all right.
he's a
Oh,
ghost
we're doing
or
so
whatever.
well.
Um, so, Jeff, for people listening, we asked you a little bit about yourself. What books would you recommend that someone start with? I discovered Cyclops Road because I got a free copy. I've told you that. Oh, look, a free horror movie or book. I'll take it. So, what books do you recommend?
Of my own, generally I would interrogate them. Say, okay, do you want the goofier stuff or do you want the more serious stuff? In the absence of any information, I generally go with Wolf Hunt, which is kind of a super violent comedy horror crime werewolf book. So
Right.
that's kind of like my default. I also sometimes will say Autumn Bleeds into Winter, which is sort of a coming of age thriller, or Allison, which is sort of a telekinetic horror thriller. Lots of humor in all of those.
Yeah,
So
and
I
I
don't
just picked Allison
like
up.
Dweller is one of my most popular books, but it's also sort of an outlier because it's very sad. And I don't generally do bummer books, but Dweller is kind of a bummer book. So that probably is the most popular thing I've ever written with readers, but it's not necessarily my starting place. And stuff like Pressure, again, that was one of my most popular ones, but it's also very, very dark and intense. And so if you're like, okay, what best exemplifies what a Jeff Strand book is? And I'm kind of all over the place, but I generally would say, okay, well, Wolf Hunt, Allison, or Autumn Bleeds into Winter.
I haven't read Allison or Autumn Bleeds. I did pick up Allison when I saw you, but Wolf Hunt and Forbidden Forest and Blister. I like those. Forbidden Forest and Wolf Hunt. I've got those on audio and I've listened to them a couple times
Oh,
uh,
cool.
because they're good, fun to listen to. It. They crack me up still, and it's well. Also at the Scares That Care, which you were recently at when I saw you, Armin Shimmerman was there, and he wrote some what I call fan fiction alternative Shakespeare history, and those are much heavier to read. And I even commented, I said, yeah, I liked reading the first one. I said, but it takes so much brain power to read it. I said, I need to get something, that a little more fun and easier to read. And your stuff has fit that perfectly. Plus, then I've gone back multiple times. So for everybody listening, you got a favorite movie, horror movie that we've done, you watch? Great. Well, here's some favorite horror books to add to that collection.
Everything's Got Teeth is the Jeff Strand book that I own.
You actually have one.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Awesome.
when you first brought him up, this is what I was saying about literary magazines. They're so nice because you can read several authors you've never heard of,
Right.
all in one compilation. But you brought Jeff up to me, and I was like, "Oh, well, I'll check it out." And so I just picked that up, and I enjoyed it a lot. I like anthologies in general, but
Thank you.
What's you've got some other great titles like Dead Clown Barbecue, which I've got digitally, haven't read yet. Was that one of the Mayhem books or not? Or is that an
No,
anthology?
Dead Clown Barbecue is a short story collection.
Okay.
I've got five five of my books are just collections of short stories. It's Gleefully Macabre Tales, Dead Clown Barbecue, Everything Has Teeth, Candy Coated Madness, and Freaky Briefs. And the others are not novels.
Okay.
And then one nonfiction book, The Writing Life.
Which again, for all the writers, if I put this up on my writer thing, I is my I have two writer books that are go tos that I have both read both of them a couple times, and one was Stephen King's On Writing.
yeah, it's a
I
good
think
one.
his beginning autobiography part is just great read to listen to. It's not dry or anything. And then the advice, yeah, that's okay. But then the other one is Your Writing Life because it's so personal and down to earth and makes me laugh while also making me feel better. It's like, yeah, I had a really crappy day. I feel like the worst writer in the world. I'll read some Jeff Strand because he'll make me feel a little better about my life. And it actually has. So you've
That's what it's
covered that.
supposed to be. It's not a book about here's how to write the perfect query letter or here's how to create characters that, come to life. It's meant to be here's what it's like if you do a book signing and no one shows up and here's how to cope with rejection. It's kind of like the real stuff about being a working writer who is not making, $100 million a year.
Which I absolutely love because that's why I started the podcast because I was tired of going into all those Facebook groups of people going, "Hey, look at the 100,000 I made this month on the three
Yeah.
books I've written," and I'm going, I can't relate to that, and I'm looking around going, "There's 50,000 people here. You can't tell me 50,000 authors can relate to that." And that
Yep.
was the genesis of the podcast. So, all right, well, what you got anything else to add to this conversation, Reese, before we let
Um,
Jeff go?
just really quickly, and if you can't say anything, it's fine. But during some of our research for, I don't remember which movie it was, one of the ones recently, we came across that somebody was working on a movie called Blister. And at the time, I think Steve had asked if I knew who that was by, and I said I have no idea at all. And so we're wondering if you had anything to do with a movie option.
I do not. I have lots of movie stuff going on. Like there's actually really cool stuff happening, at this very moment that I'm not allowed to talk about, but Blister is not one of them. So that would be a
Okay.
Blister. Blister, it's one of my best-selling novels, but the movie interest has been almost non-existent. So I've got lots of cool stuff going on, but yeah, if there's a movie being made of Blister, they've either done it without telling me or it's someone else.
Blister is an interesting book of yours too, because it's not super dark, but it's also not super funny. But it definitely is that, you know, just because someone doesn't look like you, watch how you treat them.
Yeah. Now, as you were
Well,
leading up to the question, I was ready to say yes, but I can confirm nothing. But
Sorry.
not me.
no, it's funny because a lot of the movies that we review are either early in someone's career or the people never really took off and became huge directors or anything like that. So a lot of times you'll hear about projects they're working on and they will never ever see the light of day.
Right.
And so, I thought it would be if you could actually confirm that it was something you had been involved with, maybe it had a better chance of being done.
No, I can officially deny.
Excellent.
Hopefully, this will be outdated, and Blister will have been this massive success. Oh, he was lying. No, I'm not involved in a Blister movie at this point.
Well, as soon as a big one comes out, we'll review it and
All right.
we'll do a
Yeah.
link between this one, and then we'll get you back on to tease you about it.
All right, I'm ready.
That's how we work. All right, Jeff, I appreciate you taking some time chatting with us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll let you know when the episode goes live. You can hear about all the background stuff that we discovered, and then tell us about the things we didn't know.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
Thank
See
you.
you guys. Hi, if you enjoyed this episode of Discovered Wordsmiths, please support the author. Go to their website, go to Amazon, look them up, get the book. And if you click on the link that I have in the show notes, you'll also help support the podcast so I can keep the hosting and all the software I use and keep it running to help more authors. When I am recording this, we've got over 100 episodes, lots of authors. Go to the website, discoveredwordsmiths.com. Check it out. There's a lot of great authors, probably in some genre that you love. See what they have. Check out their books. That's what the point of the podcast is for. So people can discover new authors, find some new books they love, support the authors so they can continue writing. So please support them. And if you do like the podcast, if you've been thinking of podcasting or you're a writer, I've got some links also at the website. Click on those if you're interested in any of the software or services that I talk about. Everything that I have there is something I use, so I've got an affiliate link. Again, it's a little bit, if everyone clicked on those, if they were going to get it anyway, it helps keep the podcast going. So let's all help each other out and discover more authors to read.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.